We
Maybe
should.
maybe we should set an intro video, but we can't now because we're live now. What's up, everybody? Hey, Megan. Hey, Brian.
What's up?
Hey guys.
We're back together once again against all the odds. We've defied the odds, and we're 5 minutes early, which
Or 25 minutes late.
depending on how you look at it. Okay, so we're here to talk about summer 1995. Brian has some strong feelings on the matter, but before we get into that, there's a lot of other stuff to discuss, of course, including whatever comes to mind from any of us. But I want to just say that Reprise is playing in Albany on Saturday, November 2nd. So people should go check that out. If you go to repriseband.com, you can see the ticket link and all that stuff. Brian, I've heard a rumor that there's going to be a live Beyond the Pond episode today. Beyond the Pond is, and before you give us details, I just want to tell you, Beyond the Pond is like it's like the vinyl vault, it's like the lost track,
shit.
The
like headiest shit.
Once it shows up and people are like, oh fuck, Beyond the Pond. Like you have no idea when it's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know who's going to be on it, but it's happening, right, Brian?
It's happening 9:30 Eastern tonight. We are going to go live on all platforms. Dave and I don't know if Dave's announced this publicly. If he has not, we're announcing it right now, and I will reprimand him so he announces this publicly, but we'll be going live. We're going to be chatting a bit about Dick's 2024, since we haven't done that as a twosome outside of text threads, where we have a lot that we have said about it. Prep you all for Albany coming up this weekend. And then something we have been working on behind the scenes for, the last couple of years. We are going to be counting down our top 10 albums of the 2020s so far. Hard to believe it. We are halfway through the 2020s, although it feels like we've lived 2 decades in this time.
Totally.
A lot of really, really good music has come out. A lot of really good music adapted in the COVID era and has emerged in the years since then. So we have lots of opinions, lots of thoughts. We went through each other's list last night and we're like, wow, you have that and not this. So it's going to be some good discussion, share some good music with you all. Looking forward to that. So 9:30, keep an eye out on the socials for the BTP drop.
So sick. I can't wait. I also had no idea, Justin, and I'm pretty pumped. Like my night just got so much better.
Wow. I can't believe we're halfway through the 2020s. That's my main takeaway. Jesus.
That is fucking crazy, actually. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Okay. We want you to give us reviews. We got a nice review a couple weeks ago with a song pronunciation and compliments on our work. We appreciate that. So keep doing that. Also, we got a new premium supporter this morning. You can support us for, I guess it's $5 a month if you go to osirispod.com/premium. Brian and Megan and I are, I'm just saying this out loud so that we have to do it. We are starting a podcast because we don't have enough going on and we thought that we needed a new project. So
yeah,
we are starting a book podcast starting in November. We're going to record it sometime in the next few weeks. It's going to be about a book. And that's all we know for now.
Do we know a title?
We know a lot. Yeah. Do we have a title?
Well, I had proposed Library Card because that's the Substack that I put together. And there's no
and we agreed that
podcast.
Library Card is good.
Yeah.
We agreed.
There's not a book podcast called Library Card. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
If you take it from us, we're coming for you. Because we just announced
Yeah, exactly. It's official.
Library Card.
Oh my God.
Nobody can take it.
We for episode 1, we're going to be discussing the Covenant of Water, which I just started and I have to be finished with by the time we record. So
oh my God, you'll finish it like tomorrow. So I'm not worried about it.
I'm ready. It's been a slow first 30 pages, I got to tell you.
I would say it's a hard book to get into, but it really, once you're in, you're like locked in.
Yeah, it takes a minute because it's such a totally unique world compared to, I think, any of us read. And then, yeah, like you said, Meg, once you're in it, you just start flying. And I did a lot of travel in the last couple of weeks, and there were flights where I was, pre-boarding, just reading, get on my seat, immediately start reading. And I would go like 150 pages in a day. It was awesome.
That's the fastest I've ever read a book that big, for sure.
Wow.
And it was interesting because when Brian and I were talking about it a little bit offline, I guess this is like, we should save this for the podcast, but you were talking, Brian, about how time moves in that book and how it's really different. And at first it took me a while to kind of fall into the cadence of that. But once I was there, it's amazing. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
That is so great. I've been ranking all the books I read this year. I have a top 5 that it's going to be really hard to break, but I think this probably will end up bumping something.
I haven't ranked mine yet, but it would be up there.
Question for Meg.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be required to rank the books I read versus the books I listened to on audiobook separately? What's going to happen here?
Yes, because one of them you
Such a good
read,
question.
and some of them you listened to. So those are different things. They're different things.
Actually, I'm going to make a note.
Activities.
I'm going to make a note right now on our new podcast outline to discuss what is reading.
Ooh,
that can be something that we talk about.
Brian, we've talked about this before. It needs to have an asterisk if you listened to it.
I put an asterisk, but I do have a couple audiobooks that I listen to that would very easily fall in my top 5.
Okay, they're going to have to be a different ranking, but you can put them in there, but you have to asterisk them. Because I make the rules about this, apparently.
So specific here.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is crazy. Okay, so Megan, we are talking about Summer 95, right? In theory.
Yes.
We are ranking this number 7. It was ranked number 9 by fans. Brian has already said before we started recording something that he thinks maybe this should be ranked higher. I guess, do you want to tell us about 1995 in case anyone didn't know that Phish was like around then? What was happening? What do we need to know before we get into this? And then I can ask Brian to explain why it's ranked where it is.
It's 1995, baby. This is it. This is like the first major peak. I would say this is the peak. This is the peak of all peaks in Phish history, in my mind. In June, we've got a live one dropping. And then they set out on this tour, which is the first of 2 huge tours that the band undertakes this year. And this tour is interesting too. I was thinking about it because they debut all the Billy Breathe songs, which are the complete opposite vibe of the jams, which is just like so funny to me. And I'd never really thought about it until I listened to this tour. But this tour is 22 shows, starts out west, hits Red Rocks, hits the Mid-Atlantic, then the Southeast, back to the Midwest, and then it ends in the Northeast. So there's 22 shows and 88 entries in the jam charts, but we have some debuts too. So around 4 jams per show, but some debuts in there too. But the jams that are there, they're monsters.
Some crazy shit. Shit. I texted you guys that this was the most that I've liked Summer 95 since Summer 95. I haven't
totally,
because the thing is we go through like when we do the other, series we've done and we look at 95 and it's just like, you listen to one long Tweezer or one long Bowie and those are great. But I think in the as a whole, it's really pretty interesting. And I think there's a lot of evolution in the sound just in the tour, like as you get toward the end, which I think is fun to listen to. I had a good time going back to this. Brian, should this be ranked number 7?
So I was talking to a good friend of the pod, Justin Bruce, about this over the weekend. We had a fantastic weekend touring the Front Range scene. The rock band Eggy, if you all out there haven't heard of them, you should definitely check them out because they are just popping off right now. 2 amazing shows. And we were talking about the conclusion of this series, and I hope you guys will be okay with this, but I gave Justin an eye into where our rankings are going here and why our rankings went where they did. He, like myself, looks at Summer 95 as though it's the best tour that Phish ever embarked on. For me personally, this is my favorite tour the band has ever played. That said, while I think that there are a few nits to pick with a couple of our top 5 tours, I do also think that there's rationale for them that we are going to discuss when we get to them. I think that, you know, and RJ, you just said this, like, this is the most you've enjoyed this tour since summer 95. I think that this tour is accurately in the zone of like 5 through 7 from
Mhm.
a big picture standpoint, because it is so abrasive. It is so challenging. It kind of takes the idea of Fish and blows it out into this very evil, challenging, difficult type of music that I think we all know long term had its benefits in 97, 98, 99, 2000, when they knew that they could just take any risk whatsoever and the fan base would follow along. But for me, you know, why it's ranked so high and why I would probably bump it up a couple notches. Never before or since has Fish been so tight and adventurous all at once. And no tour pushes Fish beyond what they once thought they were capable of, quite like summer 1995. You build on these wild experimentations of fall 1994. You get this more maximalist approach to their music and to their compositions than you had beforehand. This is a tour that is entirely in amphitheaters and entirely in nearly sold out amphitheaters. Like they're really growing the fan base, and they're starting to play a lot of venues that they will return to summer after summer after summer. So you're starting to see what a summer tour is going to look like going forward. So it's like this kind of shift to modern Fish in a lot of ways. And you hear the band as tight and as crisp and as, you know, on the nose of their compositions and as fast as you may ever hear them. But at the same time, they're saying, when we jam, there's no guardrails. We are just diving off and seeing how much you all can handle and seeing if we can find our way back home in any way. Usually they don't. And I think we're all the better for it.
Yeah, I it was interesting because the fan vote had this at 9, which I was surprised that we had it higher than them. Not because I don't think it deserves there, but just I think that these early 90s tours have been like bumped up higher by the fan vote than ours
Yes.
throughout the votes. But listening back to this tour, 100% deserves this place at 7. And I agree, Brian. I'm looking at list and I'm thinking like, are these other tours higher than this? I don't know. I mean, there's just such a wild, relentless energy to this tour. To me, it feels like the band at the height of their powers. I mean, I think that we're going to see that in the next tour. Obviously, the fall 95 tour, you know, has yet to come. I'm not going to tell anybody where that shakes out, but it's coming up. And that tour is definitely one of the best tours of all time for sure. But thinking about this tour and where they were historically, this is the last time the scene and the band is like completely Fish. Like after this
Yeah.
tour, Jerry's going to die and then everybody's going to migrate over in the fall. And when I was watching this happen in real time, it made a huge difference on the scene and the music and the vibe. And this is kind of like the height of their powers, the absolute machine in like full, complete control. Like you're saying, Brian, like they can go so fast, so tight, so perfect in the compositions, but then just so wild and absolutely just fearlessly take risks. And it's so exciting. And you realize they're doing that in these big spaces. Like you mentioned, Brian, to an adoring crowd that is 100% there for them. And that's the last time they're going to have that kind of a fully engaged crowd that's just there for them. I think obviously they've continued to have that throughout their career, but it really changes in the fall of 95 because people jump on tour that are just doing it because, you know, that's what they have to do. So it's, to me, it's interesting. It's like, it seems almost like the last like pure Fish tour when they're absolutely at the height of their powers.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess let's talk about the sound a little bit, because I think it's crazy that they're like all amphitheaters and that they're just like doing wild and wacky shit. But I wonder how do you guys see the evolution from fall 94 to summer 95? Because I think that fall 94, you have some really amazing moments, and you know, we talked about that, but I don't know, Brian, how do you see the evolution from those
I think this
over
is a
those
bit
6 months?
noisier, a bit more angular than you hear in fall 94. I feel like in fall 94 you get the sense of a band that while it may be intentional to play like the Bangor Tweezer, the Minneapolis David Bowie, the Providence Bowie, such and such others, the Bozeman Tweezer. You definitely you get the sense when you hear those jams that the band doesn't totally know where the off ramp is, and is just
Mm,
kind of like going with the vibe. And so there's this like how do I put it? There's almost like a youthful energy of like, oh my God, we can do this in those jams. And so as a result, you get in some of them like segues back into it, a song or like a tease within the middle of it. Whereas here, I kind of get the impression that they know where the edge is and they
mhm.
deliberately want to push beyond it. And so where there are natural on ramps back into songs or back into the song that they're playing, you get something like the Fleaser, from 622, where they just somehow end up in a cover of My Generation, but they're not really playing My Generation. They're kind of like joking on playing My Generation and also like trying to mess around with your perception of My Generation and kind of trying to piss you off while also being like, oh, cool, they're playing My Generation, but are they playing My Generation? And then there's like 8 more minutes of jamming left into that. I think there's a lot of like anti-melody and a lot of pursuits of madness in this sound.
Yeah.
Like I really get the sense, I feel like Trey talked about this in the Fish book, that they knew they could, well, they knew they were taking risks that could lose the audience. And at certain
Mhm.
times, they realized they probably were losing the audience. But it was this tension between, can you guys handle as much as we're willing to put out? And that is going to be a defining thing of Fish going forward. There's going to be a lot of long-winded harpuas told on stage. There's going to be a lot of long jams that are going to come in 2.0, and they're going to come here in the 4.0 period. There's just this is like almost from a musical standpoint, the band is testing the audience to see what can you handle. I'll say it once more though. This is also, this is the tightest band ever let loose, and I think that is something that is. It's not that they weren't tight in fall 94, but this is a band that gave themselves some time to breathe in spring of 95, recorded an album, which started with the Blob uh, experiment where they kind of went around in circles and recorded a sound, and that became swept away in Steep. They're testing out these new things that are almost like, let's not look at this in the box of how do we play a song and then jam. Let's look at this in terms of how do we play jams within jams and just like spread ideas as far as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think that like mastery of like the flow in these shows to me is better than 94. And I think that has to do kind of with what you're saying, Brian, about like their understanding of how to like use monster jams consistently, but come back to the set and be in command the whole time. To me, the power and the drive of these jams and the like mastery of tension and release really stand out. But the biggest thing to me is that these jams all have like a psychological bent to them. There's like a demented kind of like carnival feeling to everything. You feel like you're like climbing a demented staircase or like losing your mind. There's this real kind of like edginess to it that is really consistent. And I think you get that in moments in fall of 94, but you get it like very consistently here. And you hear like them doing things like repetitive riffs and Page playing a ton of piano and building, swelling and pushing and pulling back. And there's just so much of that consistently. And it's just done with like this speed that is just absolutely like, I don't know, blow your brains out. It's crazy. Listening to all this back to back, it's intense. It's really intense listening to all of these jams back to back because like you don't ever really get like a break. And like the
Yeah.
break is like classic Fish played perfectly, which is at that time fast and furious and fun.
Yeah.
And but there's never like this loose kind of silly like chill vibe. The shows are just like they're just like go go go, and then the jams are just like but they're I think they're just so psychological in a way that's different.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like they were just, I mean, it's pretty risky, in retrospect.
yeah.
Like they're
The
playing
first
these huge
time.
venues and some of them for 2 nights. And, they're not trying to please the crowd. I don't think. I mean, I think they pleased the crowd in a way that everyone knew what was going on. But I think in the traditional sense, there was really no like catering to new audiences whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
Well, and you're getting a lot of
Crazy.
like 5 and 6 song second sets, which is very like the first sets are still relatively in line with what you would have gotten in 93 and 94. There's not a ton of like massive jams. There's kind of a lot of really cool micro jams, but you're starting to see this shift away from playing like an 11 or 12 song second set and instead
Yeah.
taking 3 of those songs and condensing them and turning that into jamming space, which I have to imagine for a certain fan base or certain part of the fan base was pretty disorienting and probably frustrating at times. You know, the idea of a second set going from a bluegrass song to a rock song that kind of jammed to a ballad to a Colonel Forbins to Sorry Meg a Big Ball Jam to like a Harry Hood. There was like, you know, a lot of like flow, and regardless what type of fish you liked, you were pretty much guaranteed that. And
Yeah.
here you're getting one type of fish that goes through all these different varieties of sound. But as we all know, for some people, it can be challenging to listen to a 40 or 50-minute long jam because you're like, okay, where's the resolution? Where's the next song? You're not getting that. So you're like, you have to be locked in.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the first tour, and this might be like, I'm just not thinking at all, but I feel like this might be the first tour with like really consistent jam vehicles in like every show. Like every
Yes.
show
Yeah.
has like a pretty big monster jam in it. And I don't think every tour has that before this one. And that's a big deal because that's basically going to set the precedent for the next like forever.
Yeah.
You know, until
Totally.
like maybe early 3.0, but like I think their goal in 3.0 was to eventually get back to this model, right? So this is kind of like the modern era fish in a way.
Yeah. I think you're definitely right. Definitely true.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah. I just want to mention just the use of ballads, which I think they got better at through as the tour went on. There's just some really, really great, not really as like landing places, but more first set, a couple second set, but second sets tended to just be what you guys were describing. They're not quite the like breather in the second set. The ballads are more in the first set, although there's a couple, but there's like a lot of If I Coulds, a lot of Life Boys, a lot of just really well played breaks, you know, between the madness, particularly in the first set. But they did a good job using those.
You're also not at the point that, aside from a couple of sets, which we will talk about at some point, but we're not yet at the point where a full set is press play and go and walk away, as we will get in 2 years' time. Like by the time we get to summer 97, the jams are going to kind of meet with each other. Here you're kind of getting, to your point, Meg, one jam that anchors a show and anchors a set, and then really classic fish around that, you know, like a Poor Heart, Big Jam, Acoustic Army, Run Like an Antelope, You Enjoy Myself, like gone, you know. And so like
Pretty formulaic.
a little bit, and I think
Yeah.
I think part of that is like the risk is in the jams.
Right.
Like I like listening to full shows and full sets from this tour because it does feel like that breaking point between old fish and new fish and kind of where their sets would go
Yeah.
now. You know, where like there's like certain second sets that you just want to listen to in full that becomes the norm by 1997. We're not totally there yet now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they had like, you know, such a smaller catalog. Like it's so interesting listening to this tour after listening to like a 4.0 or 4.0 tour, because it's just, you know, their catalog was so much smaller.
That too.
And the set lists are very similar.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about some notable jams. There aren't many, but we can get through them quickly. What do you guys what do you guys want to point out first? Where do you go to first with this tour?
I go to one jam in particular. I mean, I go to a lot, but I go to one jam in particular whenever I want to go back to listen to Summer 95, and that is the June 16th Runaway Jim that opens the second set in Raleigh, North Carolina. It goes so far out there that it prompts Fishman to start yelling, "He's so far gone." It kind of like speaks to what we've been talking about this tour, where you get a lot of these like like Trey loved playing this, like his wah. Forgive me for whatever I'm about to say because I'm not a pedal guy, but like it's like his wah pedal and it's like a delay and he's got feedback going there and it just creates this weird wash of sound that comes in like every great jam. And it sounds bigger than anything I've heard them play up to this point chronologically. It really is anti-melody. It's just like it takes the theme of Runaway Jim, which is a dog that runs away from home and you have to chase after it, and years go by, and it puts that into song. It kicks off a really good set. I think that this is kind of one of those sets that you could press play on and walk away and just like listen to it entirely, no skips whatsoever. But this jam in particular, it ends up going into free in a really nice segue, and it just really exemplifies like if you don't love this sound but you're like, what is important about this? This is a band that is trying to get away from fiery solos that lead to peaks. They're trying to figure out what music can we play together that doesn't sound like a rock band playing music that has a ton of energy and teaches us how to communicate better with each other. This jam does that.
Yeah, I love that jam. I also love that show. I think it's underrated. We'll talk about that later.
Deeply.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
What
I
do
think,
you got, Megan?
Besides the two like monster tweezers, obviously, I think one jam that really kind of stopped me in my tracks when I was re-listening is the mics from Blossom from 620.
Yeah.
It's just like this journey from maximalism to minimalism that I think is so perfect. And it has like the huge, big, like psychedelic goo that you get to like swirl in the beginning. But then it has that really beautiful, dramatic ending. And I think because there's so much power and darkness in these jams that when they land in one of these really soft, beautiful, gorgeous moments, it's really breathtaking. And this is one of those jams that just totally stopped me in my tracks. And I think it's incredible. And there's a few really great mics in this tour, but that one is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. And it's kind of just like a long segue into Contact. But
the Contact is so cool too. It's actually like a good version.
Yeah, but that that kind of mellow part that you mentioned is just, it's like the beginning of this 5-minute slow segue. It's really it's really cool.
There's some unbelievable segues in this tour. Like unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, all these jams are just like cacophony is the main thing that I hear.
Oh yeah.
It's just madness. But sometimes, and I don't think there's a lot of those moments, that you're
there's not. There's only a few, honestly.
Which is kind of crazy. I mean, they do get to them in like the Hoods and Rebas and Slaves, but not really within these jams.
It's almost like they're 3 years ahead of themselves right then. Like they don't totally know that type of atmospheric, slowed down, pretty melody is what we'll be hearing in every jam in like Summer 98 or Summer 99. But they're discovering that in real time.
Yeah. It's funny because I listen to so many of these jams in the morning when I'm like getting ready for work. And it's like, wow, like 6 a.m. This is like fucking a lot to listen to at 6 a.m. I'm like, okay, like let's go to the fun house. It's 6 a.m. Great. I haven't even had coffee yet.
I think the 628 show gets like more attention, I think, in terms of those two Jones Beach shows. But I think the 629 Bowie might have the most like the most crazy. It might be the weirdest jam of the tour, at least for me. There's like almost like a Son of a Mule duel sort of thing, but Mike is really like driving a lot of it, and then later on, like there's Trey and Paige on piano, like kind of like you were describing, Megan, which is awesome. But this is just like the split up and melt from that show, and then this Bowie, which is just, it's just so weird and so it's really like one of the most exploratory and weirdest jams of the tour.
That was the first Summer 95 jam we covered on Beyond the Pond way back in episode 7, which I will remind you all, we are doing a live episode tonight right here, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We picked 4 segments and we segued the segment into a song, like another artist song that we were talking about. And the whole point was that you made, RJ, that like it gets so far out there. There's so many different ideas that are being thrown out. We're so deep in the tour that the band, it's almost like we just know that this is the area that we're going to. And David Bowie is like, there's another great Bowie from Deer Creek. There's another great Bowie from The Man. There's a great one from Atlanta, but this one just like dives off the deep end and has zero interest of figuring its way back to Bowie, but somehow still does.
They do.
Somehow
When I
still
was
does.
listening to this version, I started to fist pump when they got back to the song. And I'm not like a fist pumper. That's not like my vibe. But I was just
You
like,
don't dance
oh
like that. This is
God.
my one dance move. This is
I
all
know
got.
that's your move, Brian. You know, I have a lot of other dance moves. But this one isn't really mine. But like when they did it, I was listening on my couch, I was reading, and they came back in, and I was like, yes, like come back in. It was so smooth. It was such a great Bowie.
I'll just throw out another Bowie while we're on the topic, mostly so I can remind people that I put together a live baits track by year spreadsheet. So there's a bunch from this tour, which I'll
Saved
put in the
me.
show notes. Yeah, the 624 Bowie is on live
Oh.
bait 19. It's a little bit faster
Love
for this
song.
tour, I think. Like in terms of the jam, it's like a really much more up tempo, much more of like a rock jam than like the kind of cacophonous stuff that you hear. I think it's a little bit different, but then it does eventually get very strange and weird, like most jams on this tour. But it's kind of like has different parts, which I think a lot of these jams don't have different parts. A lot of them are just like it's just one long weird segment. This has like some kind of different moments, which are really cool.
That's an epic jam.
We
Yeah.
also covered that
No
with
way.
Drew Hitz and Don Hart, where we combined Fish with classical music, and we let Drew and Don guide us through Fish classical. That's a wild Bowie, and the fact that they played it at the Man with like that just rich sound there, in a summer of disappointment for the Philadelphia Phillies, just all the more fitting.
Yeah. So anyway, Megan, what else do you got?
I want to talk about the stash and the I didn't know from Atlanta.
Oh my God.
Because I fucking love it. This one is just like the dramatic tension in this stash. It's just builds and then just like it's relentlessly wild as it's building. But then the peak doesn't hit. Like it doesn't hit like a normal peak. It actually kind of spools out. It's really interesting. And then it just melts into probably the coolest version of I Didn't Know ever. It's slow and dark and heavy, and Fish is on the trombone and Mike's on the drill, and it's super creepy and scary, and it's really good for spooky season because I'm into spooky season because it's October. But this show also just so great. But that stash I didn't know. Really great on Live Bait 11, which I know because RJ's track list. RJ, I took a screenshot of your track list for 95 so I could cross check which dates were there. It was really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I didn't even know that Mike had the drill back then. I thought that was like a recent thing.
It was just in the fish.net notes.
Yeah.
That's all I know. I don't know. Thanks, fish.net.
Yeah. Strange.
Scarlet Fire Guitars, that is Atlanta.
Yeah,
you are
Lakewood.
correct there.
Yeah.
Great Bowie. But yeah, that stash I didn't know. I shed a few tears every time you start to hear them sing because it's just how did they figure out I didn't know there, and they made it work so perfectly. And yeah, that's like some really that's where you get into kind of that weird kind of pretty but destructive zone that they're in there. That oh man, I can't get enough of it.
Love that.
Brian, where do you want to go next?
Let's go. Well, I'm going to recommend something that everybody should know, but I feel like we can't talk about this tour without it. And that is the 626 Down with Disease and Free. This was my third tape I ever received. And I remember fourth, excuse me. I'd gotten 11/17/94 from Dayton, Ohio, 9/14/99, 10/7 2000, and then 6/26/95. And I didn't really know, I didn't have any perspective on what Summer 95 Fish was. I threw it on. First set's awesome, super classic, very fast, awesome possum towards the end of it. And then the second set has this 26-minute Disease, the second ever jammed out Disease, or no, third, excuse me. They played 2 in 94. And then it goes just wild off the rails. It feels like a modern day Disease where like it opens the second set, classic feel there. And then it just goes off into the wilderness and it finds its way into Free, which then goes into this just bizarre psychedelic waltz that I've never heard them play anything like this before. And it speeds up towards the end before it segues into Poor Heart, which is not a song I'm ever asking for deep in a second set, but it totally works here. The show also has a great You Enjoy Myself. Man, it's just like every time I hear this, it brings back memories of like discovering Fish in the moment. It sounds to me like as classic a Fish as you could ever be, as the music that they could ever make. And it just taps into kind of all the themes that we're talking about here. There's some spooky stuff. There's some really weird for the sake of weird stuff. There's some loud, aggressive stuff. There's some really fast stuff. There's some quiet, contemplative stuff. It's all just kind of mixed in, and it feels really special that, you know, as they're headlining SPAC here in this summer, they're figuring out ways to just tap into whatever their inspiration is.
This is one of my favorite jams of the whole tour and where I was going to go next. I just think these two songs together are perfect. Like you said, Brian, the Down with Disease is like, it's just like a horror film soundtrack. It's so agitated and just so stressful. And the segue into Free is probably my favorite segue of the whole tour. It's incredible. It's so great. I think there's just like, it's a perfect example of like power and intensity jamming, but done really well.
Yeah,
Totally.
and the only Down with Disease we'll talk about on this episode.
It is. I mean, Disease is still not firmly rooted in the rotation. I don't believe they play another Disease until Hershey 12/1/95. Someone correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that this is the last one, and then they'll play one in Providence that's 32 minutes. But we're like right just before Disease becomes the song that you can set your clock to, you know, like every time they come out for a second set, like, what do you think they're going to play? Oh, I don't really know. Disease. Yeah, sure. Why not? And then they come out and they open with it.
They also played it like 100 times in 94. And it was like,
Right.
just like it was like 4 minutes long and didn't like, it just hadn't developed. And that 626 is a Live Fish release, of course.
Yep.
One thing that people should know is that the 628 tweezer is on Live Bait 10, which is, there's some real Dave's Energy Guide jamming in there in the middle. It's not some bullshit teases. It's like, but that jam is like kind of like free like in the middle there. And there's a Cannonball jam into the Dave's Energy Guide back into tweezer. That is a real, I mean, that's a heavy hitter from this tour, but that's
a carnival
glad we got the
ride.
soundboard.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I think you have to listen to every Tweezer, Bowie, and Yem on this tour because the Yems too, like they're not always amazing jams, but I think it's the perfect way to hear the sound of this tour because it's so tight in the composed area, but loose where it needs to be, kind of like what you were talking about, Brian. It's just the Yems can be they're really exciting. They're really kind of thrilling. Like think about the one from like 629. It has this like really wild like drums and bass section that's just, it's like thrashing the whole way through. It's just like they're just careening through the song. It's you know, it's like sometimes when I go to see Fish now, like sometimes I'm nervous that they're not going to be like on their game, which they usually are, but it's just because I have like anxiety about wanting it to be really good. But like when you listen to Summer 95, you don't have to worry about that. Like they're just going to be excellent.
Yeah, I wonder if this was like, I'd love to jump back to a tour like this and just see how fans felt going in, because part of me would imagine this was when complaining started, because the sound is so aggressively different than what you would have gotten from Fish shows before. But also, I think to your point, like, we hadn't yet gone through the down years where they were trying
Yeah.
to reset and they were trying to figure themselves out. There was still there's still such an upward momentum that even
Yeah.
if you got like Waterloo, I've always heard was kind of the bum show of the tour for a lot of reasons. But I'm sure there were a lot of people there that just like had a killer time because Fish was playing at a high level and you got a Harpua. But it is funny you mentioned like those three songs. I'm just looking at my list of top jams, and like without saying dates, it's like Tweezer Mike's Tweezer Stash, Bowie Jim Stash, Tweezer Bowie Melt Mike's
Exactly.
Tweezer Bowie Mike's, like every other show they have a song
It's
that
the
they can
same.
play. and
Yeah.
and so you get a little bit of sameness in that sort of standpoint. But I think to a point RJ made at the start of the episode, there is a lot of evolution. Like I think the Bowie Johnny Be Good Bowie from
Yeah.
7-3 breaks a lot of molds that you're expecting to hear them kind of go into a different style within the jam. And it's just clear on the last night of the tour they still have stuff to explore and they still have stuff to say, and they're still trying to like figure out where are we going. And
Hmm.
they have a 2.5 months off before a 3-month tour, so they want to just like get it all out there before they take a break.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really interesting when you talk about that, like what fans were thinking about, because I saw one show on this tour, and it was my second Fish show ever at Deer Creek, which I want to talk about that show for sure because it's perfect. But so many of us were fairly new to Fish, especially because they were in
That
these
too.
amphitheaters. And so like even though like I had been listening to a lot of Fish, I wasn't like I was more of a Deadhead still. And so like I was definitely like really into Fish, and I was going to see them like I saw them in the fall of 94, and then I made sure I saw them this summer, but I wasn't like on tour and I wasn't listening to every show. I was getting like some tapes people would give me and I would listen to them, and I would like loved them and I was really into it, but I wasn't obsessive yet. And I think most fans at these shows were not obsessive fans. Most fans were like deadheads, kids that like Dave Matthews Band, kids that like, all this other kind of stuff that we were listening to then. And then they were just at the Fish show, probably on a lot of acid, probably having an amazing time, and less intellectual about the music, or less analytical, I should say. And I'm sure there are definitely people who were ahead of me and were, really analyzing it. But a lot of us were just there to have a really great time and see a really fun killer band who we were just starting to get into.
So it's like going to a Goose show.
For me, a while ago, now I have like stress about Goose. I used to be chill about Goose. Now I'm not chill about Goose anymore because I really like them. I wish I could be more chill. It's like going to an Eggy show for me.
There we go.
Okay, so we have to take a break because that's just what we're required to do.
Because
So
we
let's do
mentioned
that.
Goose.
Let's do that now. Let's give everybody a breather, and then we will be right back. Okay. All right. We got to talk about some shows that we like. I think
Yeah.
we like a lot of them. I just wanted to say quickly, I was listening to I did get a little bit of the tour fatigue toward the end, where I was like, all right, we're getting the same kind of sounds toward the end after 75 or whatever. But when I was listening to the 630 mics, which was another crazy jam, I was thinking that there's no way that this sound could have lasted beyond like one tour.
I agree.
That's
Like
That's a
interesting.
really good
I
point.
don't think they could have just like
Kept
gone
doing
on
this.
to like it. There's no way it could have lasted sound wise, but I think it was an important like step toward, fall
Mhm.
95, which ends up being just a lot more balanced in terms of like the weirdness and the beauty and but I think the patience that they showed during these like really long jams really paid off for them later, far into the future too.
I think that's a really strong point. I think as much as I love this tour and I love the sound of this tour, I'll just go back to something I said at the start. I think it's very intentional what they were trying to do on this tour. And I think that it's less about this is how the music is guiding us, and more them saying like, let's try to, they're kind of putting their thumb on the scale this tour and saying like deliberately, we are going to
Mhm.
push music in a direction that may challenge you and may hurt your ears and you may not like, but we promise this all has like a larger goal to it. And throughout, you're going to have moments that you really enjoy. And I think for a lot of fans, they look back on this tour as like a high watermark
Mhm.
of the band's experimentation and of the band's willingness to be a rock band playing in front of 20,000 people and just saying fuck it and just like diving off the deep end. But that is also really hard to do. And I wonder how if they would have sustained amphitheater attendance were they to play like this 2-3
Yeah.
years from now.
That's interesting.
And we should talk about shows, but Guy Ross, who's watching on Instagram, said one thing I noticed in the beginning of a few jams, you can hear Trey and Fishman fighting each other on the tempo. Trey wanting to lay back and Fishman wanting to stay on top. I think you can definitely hear that in a lot of these
Mm.
jams. Some of them like become more up tempo, and then some of them are just much slower.
It's such a good point because it's another thing Trey says in the Fish book, which is all those interviews are taken throughout 1997, where he talks about the biggest challenge for Fish is that Fishman plays too fast and is always like a half step ahead of everyone else. And I wonder like if their thought process when they were giving those interviews was still coming out of this period of Fish.
Mhm. Fishman is out of control on this tour.
Because like think about nowadays when they play a ballad, like they really play a ballad and the band is quiet and it's a true breather. And then, you know, you get to moments in jams in modern day Fish where like the band can play really pretty. Like you think about the MSG Tweezer from 2019, like that could not
Yeah.
happen in summer 95. Like
No way.
maybe a couple bars of it could have happened, but then pretty soon Fishman's going to go rah and just like immediately dive back
Totally.
into.
Okay, what Megan? What's one show that you wanna highlight? I bet if we each do two, we can kind of get through our biggest recommendations. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the 4 big shows that kind of everybody knows about, I think, like Finger Lakes, Blossom, SPAC, and Mud Island. But I think there's some really underrated shows that are incredible. I mentioned the Walnut Creek show earlier. I think that's super underrated. You've got really strong playing in the first set, standout version of like incredible version of It's Ice. And then you've got these 2 monster jams in the second set. You've got like this 30-minute dark masterpiece that Brian talked about in Runaway Jim, which is one of my favorite jams of the whole tour. And then you have this dance party, just joy in Yem. And you've got a short sit-in, which this would be good for Trey to remember about sit-ins, is that really short is great. Definitely don't have to be 2 shows. But this is just like, you know, Tinsley Boyd comes out, like plays a little fiddle and Yem, and then he's out. Just a great show, though. I think this is a show that, yeah, Brian, you said this about the second set. You could just put it on, but I think the whole show is like that. It's a front to back, great show.
Truly great show. Truly great show.
I mean, we might as well just talk about Mud Island while we're here, which is a live Fish release, of course. So you know, everyone knows the show. I do think the whole show is really it's really fun. I mean, it's a great show. It's kind of a perfect show. But this the tweezer it's different every time I listen to it. There's
Yeah.
so much. There is some like really nice, quiet, lovely parts. I think this might be like one of the most beautiful parts of the whole tour is like in the middle of this, but then it just like gets weird again, and then it kind of goes back and forth throughout. But quite a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, you get a digital delay loop jam in there. It's just, yeah, there's a quiet, beautiful stuff. It finds its way back into Tweezer at like 24 minutes, and you think we're wrapping this up, and you're only halfway through it. It's just, It's a monumental achievement. It's on YouTube. You should watch it. It's so wild to see the band just like continue to commit and dive back in, and it's just wild stuff. Yeah, and this show, like, I'm a huge advocate for this run here of 614, 615, 616. I think that the three shows really complement each other nicely.
Hmm.
The set lists have really strong flow in them. You get kind of everything we've been talking about in this episode that like is this perfect snapshot of Summer 95 Fish, where it's really fast, really well played songs, and then huge jams. Just kind of gives you a little bit of all of that.
Yeah, I think this is the best jam of the tour, and it's the perfect second set. It's like Acoustic Army kind of like landing in that after this huge jam. It's such a 95 move. Like I heard this song like 4 times in fall of 95. And then Guitar Gently Weeps. Like it's perfect. It's so good. And this Atlanta show, like since you just mentioned it, Brian, I think that was on my list of underrated too. This is like great flow, great set list. You've got the exploration, tightness in the composed stuff, but then some real like rock moments. You've got that stash I didn't know that I talked about, huge Bowie and a great Slave. Just, I think I agree. Like, I think that this run is really strong, those 3 shows. I like that as a box set. That's a cool idea. Into it.
It's my dream. It's my dream box set, along with
really good.
$725.99 being officially released, which we got to get in every episode.
You did it.
Megan, do you want to talk about your show?
Yeah, I'll just mention it. I mean, I think people know about the Deer Creek show because of the dinner and a movie and the official release. But this is a perfect show. It's tight when it needs to be. It's exploratory when it needs to be. Perfect classic Fish first set. You've got 3 jams anchoring the first set. A fantastic theme opener. This is such a fucking awesome way to open a show. You've got a really compelling Reba and a scorching Antelope to close. Like that, there's like these 3 tentpole jams in that first set, which is just, it's so great. And the second set is just classic summer 95 Bowie and Yem, which is like exactly what you need. And one of the best nights of my life, absolutely magical. This is when Fish Tour was pure and perfect. And it was like a perfect day in Indiana, and I'll never forget it. And I'm just so thankful I was there. And I think that this totally encapsulates the summer of 95 sound for me, this show.
Yeah, remember when they announced this as the dinner and movie? It was at the time that they were starting to really dig into 1.0 and 2.0.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of being like, okay, well, at least it's a summer 95 show, and it's never been one I've listened a ton back to outside of the Bowie. And then they played the show, and it was just like you said, Meg, it just like it goes in kind of waves. There's some really high points. That Reba is unbelievable. The You Enjoy Myself is unbelievable. I think it's a really great statement about who the band was in summer 95. And it's been a great official release. I keep debating what to share here because like, we all know the SPAC show. I don't need to say anything more about it. I think I'm going to highlight the Great Woods shows back to back. I don't think that they don't reach the jamming depths, but I do think it is kind of this alternate pathway for this tour where you get extremely classic set lists, some dives deep. The mics from 630, the Stash and Split Open and Melt from 7-1 are all really great stuff. You're not getting like the full on freak out. So what you're getting more of is how tight, how melodic, how just like perfectly playing, how perfectly Fish played their songs in summer 95, and how, like you mentioned earlier, Meg, they have less songs. Part of the reality of having less songs is that like pretty much every song is a banger. If they played these set lists today, people
Totally.
would kind of lose their mind. I had this as kind of like a potential box set to be released, just as kind of like a diet 95 approach. Like if you want to hear it without fully diving into the deep end, it's cool to see that over a 2-night run in a really classic venue where a year earlier they played, 2 years earlier, they played the biggest show they'd ever played to that point in time. A year earlier, they played the last Gamehenge that they would play for almost 30 years. And then here they're closing out the proper part of the summer tour before the kind of proto festival. You just hear a band, and these are the last Great Wood shows until 1999. Like this is kind of a send off, a true send off to the Northeast, to kind of old, the old idea of what this band was is kind of like a DIY project. It's going to change dramatically over the next couple of years.
That If I Could from 7-1 is so
Oh,
good. It's like got the classic guitar intro, and then it has this like really passionate jam. And I think this is Fish's most romantic song. There's been a bit of a debate on Twitter about this. Maggie Rose has joined in. She disagrees with me. She thinks it's shade, but I really feel like this is what romance is about to me. And I love this song so much. What are you
Yeah.
making that face for, Brian?
Shade.
Shade
love
is
Shade.
amazing.
I
do
love
too.
Shade. But I don't think there's anything more romantic than If I Could. Like the entire idea of the
Thank you.
song is that you cannot provide what you should provide, but you know that you should. Like, it's just like this is
Yes,
the
it's
aching
romance.
romanticism. Yeah.
Exactly. It's pining. It's romantic. This is it. This is it. Shade is beautiful, but it's like you already have it. And shade is about like a lasting thing. Romance is about something you don't have. So yes,
Yeah, it might be reflective of the songwriters at those times, you know?
exactly.
Potentially, like they've changed and grown up, and
I know.
they've experienced love on different sides, and so that might be what it is. You're right.
Hmm.
Although I think
like
Tom
that.
has described Shade as waste all grown up. So,
I hear that.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, I like that.
which I don't know if that, Okay, 7-1 also has a great hood. Just want
Mhm.
to say
Great
that.
hood.
Um,
Every
the
Harry Hood in this tour is just it's incredible. But go
Yeah,
on.
they're perfect.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back quickly to Deer Creek. The Reba, which I think we mentioned, that like that groove they get into in the middle is really cool, and I think shows how they were just like willing and able to kind of push the envelope, not just in these long jams, but they're pretty loose. It's loose, but also like extremely good. I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, that's actually one of those quieter moments. I think you're right. They find more of those in the composed stuff, but this is a really veiled, dreamy version. Really kind of feels collective. They all feel like they're just working together in this like really beautiful way. It's such an excellent version of that song.
I think this 610 Red Rocks show is really great. That's like a live fish release candidate to me.
Mhm.
The beginning of it, I mean, the Makasupa to start it off, and then there's like this "You Enjoy Myself" in the first set that ends up in "Lonesome Cowboy Bill," and the Mike's groove in the second set is really really fun. And the first day in the life as the encore, that's a really good show, especially that early in the tour. They were ready from the start.
Yeah, and this is still a band that can play Red Rocks without completely taking over the town of Morrison. Like it's
Yeah, a
still
year
a
later.
small a year later, no, but this is still like a small, kind of curiosity. If you heard about Fish at this point in time, it's because someone told you or you discovered them. You're not hearing about them necessarily on the radio. And to play a show like this that is pretty perfectly crafted set list wise and just feels like Colorado and feels like Colorado in the summer at Red Rocks. I'm so into it.
Yeah, this Mike's was actually on my list of favorite jams. It's so good. It gets like dark and murky, and they have that simple jam in there a little bit, and then it gets scary and like completely falls apart, and it has that super dramatic climax. And then the hydrogen is great, and then there's a killer Weekapog that just like pushes boundaries. It's a really great Mike's groove, and it's on Live Bait 6, which I know thanks to RJB.
The mics, there's like a part where I in my notes I said it was like standing on another planet in the dark and not knowing like where you were going. That's
Oh
a
my God, I
really
love
good
that.
one.
Yes, yes, exactly.
There's so many times that happens in this
like-
tour.
it's
All
like
right,
Kurt
one
Vonnegut.
more thought from everyone.
My big takeaway from this tour is that they found out that going for it, whatever it is, worked with this crowd. This is an audience that will accept that. They'll be along for the ride with them. But what's important to me is that reinvention is coming next. Fish is on the precipice of being completely free as a band. They're going to be able to play any type of music, and you as the listener will learn new styles of music as a result. You'll dance to new music or you'll fist bump to new music, whatever you prefer. Be it fast, be it slow, be it experimental. Like if there's any takeaway from this tour, it's that they can basically play anything. And this is not to compliment the pissing in the ears of the listeners and people happily lap it up critic from 2 years later. But in some ways, we are a fan base that like we're very open to where this band is going to take us and what types of music they're going to introduce us to. And to me, this tour just proves that they have found this very unique union of freedom in art creation and a very open-minded audience that's going to listen to them.
I like thinking about the audience. I hadn't really thought a lot about that, and it's so true. It's so important to their development to know that about their audience, and I think that's really interesting. To me, Summer '95 is the absolute peak of the purest form of Phish, met with consistent jam vehicles, and I think that is really, to me, what this summer is about, and why it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting how I think what you're saying about Fall '95 is right, Brian. I mean, Fall '95 is kind of it's the most free that Phish is, I think, to be Phish, maybe
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And I think this part of this is like when the partying kind of picked up, which I think was right around this time or right after. But what do you guys think this sound did to allow Fall '95 to be, I guess, more of a balance? Like, because I think, excuse me, like you go to the Orlando show from Fall '95 or the Binghamton show or any of those others where there is weirdness, but it's in the context of like a really kind of magical moment that they somehow seem to have like distilled in a way that is it's much more, it's like much shorter but more powerful. And I just don't know how this allowed them to get to that, because it's totally different. I mean, there aren't that many long jams in Fall '95.
This is to me like the Vision Quest, where we're going out, we're exploring, there's no guardrails, we are seeing what we are capable of doing, and the natural counter to that and the natural bounce back is December '95, where they know they can get as far out as they want to, but how do we work melody? How do we work song ideas back into this? So I think you're absolutely right that comparison to the stash, the big 45-minute stash from Orlando, there's some weird music there. There's some abrasive music, but for the most part, Trey is trying to figure out, how do I play a riff in here that we build off of, rather than how do I just play noise. And so I think that tour is like, you see a band that has just gone completely off the rails in a good way, figuring out how do we take those lessons and apply them towards music that's a little bit more accessible. And so you get this band that is both fast, risky, able to stop on a dime, able to like imagine being deep in some of these like 35, 40, 50-minute jams here on this tour and still following your bandmates. Even when it's really challenging, when you apply that to, I'm going to play this melody that everybody's going to like, you still have that muscle memory to listen and bounce off of each other, but you're doing it in a way that is slightly more accessible. And it's a weird word to use, because December '95 is not necessarily accessible music to the larger population, but like, that Binghamton Haley's, that riff, it's an earworm. It just gets in your head. I don't know of many earworms in Summer '95.
And I also just want to say, Megan, and then you should jump in. With very few exceptions, if you take You Enjoy Myself out of Fall '95 jam charts, there's only like 2 or 3 that are over 20 minutes, which is kind of crazy about it.
Yeah.
To this tour, which is, it only ends 2 months before. It's such a stark difference that I kind of wonder how that. I don't know if it was conscious on their part or not, but I don't know. What do you think, Megan?
Well, I keep trying to think of the right metaphor, and I was struggling with this all week, because I agree. And it's almost like when you train really hard to do something and you do something like completely big and explosive, then you learn how to rein it in and manipulate it better. And I can't think of like the right metaphor for that, but I think that's kind of what you were just saying, Brian, is that they're going as far out as they can, and then they realize how to manipulate that, and also how to find melody again within that, and how to not just search for the noise, but search for maybe the melody within the noise. I don't know. I think I'll have to listen to Fall 95 again to really I'm excited to listen to it after having listened to this. It's not next week. Next week is a different tour that I really love. But yeah, I'm excited to hear that after and really think deeper about that. But it is fascinating because you're right, they're actually not that far apart in time.
Yeah, but totally different. I think totally
Yeah.
different. I mean, toward the end of Fall 95, you start getting some, crazier jams, but just compared to this, it's like night and day, I think.
It is. And I think part of that is the difference of like the open air amphitheater versus the arena. The arena kind of inspires. Although I'm going to contradict myself because Fall 94, most of those jams are played within arenas. So I'm already wrong. But I mean, that's where my head went first, that like you have this open jamming exploration. People always call Summer 95 the summer camp or summer space camp tour. There's just a sense of like, you come out of these weird amphitheaters in kind of the middle of like on the outskirts of cities, at like 11, 12 o'clock at night, and everyone's a little spun out. And then you show up at the next one. It looks just like the last one, but it's different in a different state. And there's this weird repetition to it. Whereas like, you get the mix of in Fall 95, which we will talk about, the return to the Northeast, the holiday aspect of it, the fact that they're going to play 2 nights at MSG. There's a different level of excitement to that you kind of still get this sense, and maybe this is the pre-Jerry, post-Jerry aspect of a band that is still just like, nobody's paying attention to us, so why don't we just do whatever we want?
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it too. And I'll just say really quickly, RJ, is that I saw a bunch of the shows at the beginning of the Fall 95 tour, and it was complete, there's no jams, just no jams. It was just all the Billy Bree songs, over and over again, no jams. Yeah. It was weird. And I actually remember thinking the shows I had a blast, but I remember thinking it wasn't what I expected. I had an expectation a little bit after listening to all the summer shows and getting more invested now that Jerry was dead and I couldn't go see the Dead anymore. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited to talk about that.
Do you think that it made the top 25?
Fall 95?
Yeah.
It might have. I don't know. I got to look at the list again.
I don't know. We'll see. Maybe.
It might have been 26.
Yeah, it might have just missed the cut.
Might have missed the cut. Okay, so let's talk about some scheduling. We got next week. We're gonna recap the Albany shows, which are this weekend. And then let's see. Then
you want to announce when we're doing that?
Sure, I'd love to. We just figured it out right before we started recording, so it's a good time to do that. We are going to be recording on Monday, October 28th at 5 o'clock Eastern, which means that listen to all the shows and then come hang out with us on Monday afternoon, and we will. If you're listening, it'll be up on Monday night. The following week, we are going to be going to the number 6 ranked tour, which was the number 3 ranked tour by fans.
I love this tour.
Summer US 97. That's gonna be fun. There's a lot to talk about there. So we're gonna be back. So Brian basically planned this out so well that we're gonna end this series on December 20th or something. So we're going all the way up to the end of the year, but we're getting close. We only have 6 more. So I don't know what's going to happen after this, but
I'm going to be so sad when it's over. But I also will be excited to listen to something other than Phish sometimes.
Yeah. That is that's the yin and the yang of this whole thing.
We're also going to work a draft in.
Oh, we are going to do a draft.
Yeah.
We are going to do a draft.
Should we announce
when are we going to do that? Yeah, we should do that.
I don't know when, but sometime we're going to do what is it going to be a 25+ minute long jam draft or a 30-minute 25 minute
25 25
25 and above. I'm currently making the spreadsheet so that we can start diving in. I have no idea yet how I'm going to organize the categories.
Yeah.
Maybe by 5-minute increments. I don't know. We'll see. But we're going to do that, which will be fun. And then we'll have an announcement to make here at some point in the next couple of weeks about early 2025. It's going to look a little bit different than what we've done here these last 2 years. But I think you guys are going to really enjoy what we've got going on. And then we will have something else in store for you guys throughout 2025. Should be a ton of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate you all hanging out with us. Give us reviews and all that stuff. And I guess did we fully talk about our live fish release candidates, by the way, for summer 95? Do we want a lightning round? Brian, you did the box set. Was that yours?
My box set would be 614 to 616. With and Shimmy suggested this is a great call. At least add the Stash and Tweezer Be Good as the filler on the box set. I'm game for that. That's a great call.
Yeah, those were so fun. I was just listening back to that today. I mean, we have to have Finger Lakes released. Like, what is happening? And then I agree. I had Walnut Creek, Lakewood, and then maybe Sugarbush just for fun. 7-3.
We really didn't talk about the Finger Lakes.
We do have the second set as a filler to the 620 show.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think
Thank God.
you're right.
I mean, you have to have that, but it's and then when you listen to it, it comes up on Live Fish as 620. Like it's under there as filler, but it's like it's annoying. Like you can't. I don't know. Also, why aren't from the archives on Live Fish? Can we talk about that?
Lots of things to talk about with Kevin Shapiro. When we have him on, the first question is going to be, when are you releasing 725.99?
We'll give you that. We'll give you that.
The second question can be, where the hell are they from the archives? Because they're all like, soundboard.
Yeah. Like that Runaway Jim is, right? It's been released from the archives, but it's not officially released anywhere, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is
cool.
really
That's
messing.
insane.
It's really messing with my best of 1.0 playlist that I put together over the summer. All this stuff is out there. It's in soundboard quality, but I just don't have it.
Okay, so to the Incredible Perp, yes, 620. You got to go to the 620 show, and then you'll get that's the filler on the 620 release. Okay,
the whole show is good.
I think we need bookended releases. So I think we need 610 from the beginning of the tour and 7-3 from the end of the tour.
I like that.
Those are my nominations.
The more we talk, the more I'm just going to say that this is one of maybe the top 7 tours should have the entire tour released.
Sick.
That's a good idea.
Sick. At least top 5, maybe. At least top 10.
At least top 5.
Such a good idea.
Every show.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. All right.
Before we go,
get on the phone with the people and tell them that. Yes.
Yeah,
Brian.
they listen to us when we demand releases. I have not been demanding 725.99 long enough, is what you're saying. 9:30 tonight, same place, Osiris Media YouTube, BTP, Instagram page, Osiris Media, what is it, Twitter or X? I don't know. Whatever it may be. We are going live. We are talking our 2-month later recap of Dick's 2024, plus our 10 favorite albums of the 2020s so far. Please tune in.
I can't wait.
That is so fun. And for those of you listening, I think you can find it as a podcast after that.
It will be released as a podcast after that. It's crazy technology, man.
I sent my top 20 Fish Jams of all time list to the Incredible Perp via Instagram because he asked me a couple times, and I'm glad that I did. And I will say that I think the Mud Island Tweezer might go in on that list, which I don't have a summer 95 jam on that list.
It wasn't on there yet. Oh, that's so cool. So is something going off then? Like, are you strict? Ooh, this is
I don't know. Maybe it just goes to the top 21.
That's amazing. I can't believe Trey wanted your top 20 list. That's amazing. I know that Trey is the Incredible Part.
Yep. He's always asking me for stuff. I don't have any strong feelings about what should be released, though. That's why I just, I'm just like, whatever you guys think.
610, 7-3.
Yeah.
No strong
I'd be so sad if that happened ahead of 725.99.
That would be really fucked up. Just randomly 610 comes out. You're like, what the fuck?
All right. Thank you guys. We'll see you on Monday for Albany Recap. Everyone going there. Have fun. Be safe.
Have a blast. Bye,
Peace
everyone.
out, guys.